beyond the boundaries. So we have talked about jazz being a skill set that you need to fulfill the metric structure, chord structure, harmonic structures, and you need to do all this data processing in split seconds, and may even need to be as skillful as pounding, cooking, in dissecting the cow. So all these are like, crazy kind of ability. So, but is jazz all about complying standards? Is jazz about complying rules and showcasing the intelligence and the abilities? Yes, all right, but there is always a part which is not about all these things. Taking jazz improvisation as a skill that works against constraints may reflect part of the nature, but this notion can also be misleading, right? As much as the jazz giants have given narratives on their keen attitude in practice and working out their technicality in improvisation, but jazz is not, as mentioned in the beginning, jazz is not merely a set of skills to be mastered. To what ends do these skills serve? Is jazz a means for self-actualization or a means for expression? Is jazz a medium or a message? Is jazz a formula or the games? If the craft of a butcher as pounding or cooking is the same with jazz improvisation, then how does jazz improvisation differ from any other non-improvisatory or less improvisatory arts? Like how how is jazz different from driving a car, making a table, different from cooking, and so on? So I am speaking without the perspective of jazz history here. So um, this talk is really from philosophical, phenomenological point of view, meaning I'm looking at the mechanism of thinking about jazz. Of course, from historical perspective, sociological perspective, you can give a lot of answer to what jazz is. But now we are focusing on the mechanism, thinking mechanism of jazz. So the production of new ideas is fundamental to improvisation, since it is not enough for improvisers to produce music that has already been composed. They must produce something that, at least to them, introduce novelty. For jazz artists, improvisation is reproduction, not in the form of a copy, but something new formed out of the fragments of prior productions. Those are from Simon 2008. Now, by comparing a recording of the tune Bamsha Swing of Cecil Taylor and that of Thelonious Monk, Stephen Block argues that there are indeed connections between the early style of free jazz and previous jazz style. His arguments can be summarized as below. I don't want to go too much into this talking about this literature by Stephen Block. Basically, it is talking about free jazz. He's trying to explain about free jazz. You can read here, but I would just like to move to the next slide, which is we are at a more fundamental focus about what jazz is. So we just keep that free jazz. Forgive me, I put that in because I was tempted. Sorry. Now, Johnson Ladd again, 2002. I quote him a lot. Don't. So I think this is quite useful. So when we talk about new thing, we know jazz is obliged to come up with new thing, but how new is this new thing? So a computing theory for creativity, he used the word Nonce. Okay, if you think that's cool, just use it. Number one, in jazz, creativity is novel for the individual. So the result of improvisation is new, at least for the player. All right, number one. Number two, creativity is optionally novel for the society. the improvisation result may or may not be something new for the society as a whole. Meaning, you don't need to play something that is like groundbreaking, like new scientific discovery kind of things in your jazz playing. This is only optional, meaning you can be a Thelonious Monk, or you can just be a Billy Strayhorn, maybe. You know, those who play more obediently. Now, number 3, creativity is non-deterministic. This means the result of improvisation is unknown in the mind of the player. So when you play, you would not know what is the result. So if you are a person who is very anxious for things going out of control, I think you are not suitable for jazz. In real life, it's a different story, but when you play music. Johnson Ladd adapted this computer knowledge, though without the assurance whether creativity is really non-deterministic. So don't worry about that part. Number 4, creativity is dependent on a criteria or constraints. Now we're coming back to rules. The improvisation done satisfy pre-existing constraints and criteria of a genre and the player's own personal style. Number 5, creativity is based on existing elements. Improvisation cannot be constructed out of nothing. Now, Joaya in 1998 proposed a retrospective model for jazz by Brown, in telling that jazz improvisation is a situation where there is no retake, you cannot be erased, one is done is done. Number 2 is a forced choice. Forced choice means I don't want to make a choice, but no, you got to do it now, and what it is, and then you are forced to play something. Forced choice. And number 3, no script, meaning no score. I think number 3 is a bit fishy. A lot of jazz musicians have script. They don't tell you, you know, there are some hidden script here and there. But jazz improvisation is a situation that's irreversible. That is correct. Now, Brown continued to say that, now this is the word that a lot of jazz musicians like, say non-conformism. Mean we are more rebellious kind of things. You ask us to follow the strong beat, we play the weak beat. You want us to play on beat, we play off beat kind of things. The chord will always come before and after, and never on the time. Support the imperfectness, but you see, imperfectness is also one feature of jazz, linking it to the social repression history of the African American. Thinking that this interpretation may not encompass all genres, so Brown preferred another term called syncretism. So this is followed by the act of improvisation approach as regulative ideals, which can happen in 3 levels. These 3 levels, the first level of safeguarding the fundamental task of producing an outcome that is pleasing to the audience and at the same time determining significant numbers of features in playing. This I have spoken in class. So the first job of a jazz player is just the same with any professional musician and pop player. The first stage is you got to play the chord and the notes and the style correct. If you go out of time, no need to talk anymore. Right? So you got to be correct in your playing. It is not a neurotic mumbling nonsense and go high in a trance. No, it's not something like that. You got to be standard, the first level. Now the second level is pushing the limit within the boundaries, and the third level, change the rules of games. To change the boundaries of the tacit understanding of accepted approach to the general setting. So second level is what most of us are always doing, trying to make the music sound not like that music, try to confuse the player. Non-conformism. But the third level, I think maybe only the jazz giant could do it effectively. Just like you name Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Coltrane, Art Blakey, every jazz giant, when they play, they actually change the rules of games. They approach things totally differently in one certain aspect. So this main point is that improvisation is an act that accompanied by risk, even from the first level. It's always risk because you come unprepared. To improvise is to take risks. Now, the last part of this second session is I just want to quote. This is my favorite quote from Sargent, from Winthrop Sargent. It's talking about what is the, what do you call this, the essence, what is jazz, what is the explanation for jazz. This is what he says. Now, when players are not quite sure what is going on to happen next, the music takes on the aspect of a tussle in which individual players may actually try to unhorse each other, unhorse, make the others fall down from the horse, as well as the audience, unhorse the audience as well. So it's something like, when you play something in 3/4, but you come with a 4/4 rhythms. In the 4/4 songs, you come with a 5/4 patterns. That's why I always say polyrhythm is important in my piano lessons. Now, by means of conflicting rhythmic aspects and rhythmic impacts, when players, dancers, and audience alike are hanging desperately to their sense of rhythmic orientations on one hand, and are violently disturbing it, or listening to it being violently disturbed on the other hand, the result is jazz in its purest form. So the summary from this second section is that, in contrast to the first section that we talked about, jazz is all about skills, compliance to theory and methods and all these things. But now you can see jazz is actually a form of attitude. It comes with a form of attitude, or the spirit of what we said just now. And it is perfectly for this kind of unique spirits that you find in jazz, the principles of non-conformism, spontaneity, trying to unhorse each other and trying to stay on with your sense, and trying to come up with something new but not new to the community, also never mind, and all these things, and also sometimes even change the rules of the games. Now, the organization behavior, all these organization consultants, they love all these principles because these principles bring new insights to their organization. You get what I mean? I'm not talking about jazz anymore. I'm talking about how unique this set of principles can bring changes in organization. For example, jazz is known as a very democratic, very egalitarian kind of art, because there's no conductor, no composer, nobody who say things must be done in a certain way, but the band know how to come together in one piece, right? And to accept voices of differences. In jazz, everybody is noisy, every player is noisy, they try to unhorse each other, but still they are playing in a team. So those are very interesting aspect of organization. It tell you what, actually I had the idea of once to do all this training for the big companies, all this like human resource training for their retreat by using jazz. Maybe we can have fun and earn some money from that, but this dream has never come true yet. So if you're interested, yeah, maybe we can give it a try. Need a lot of planning, but it will be interesting.